It's great to have an opportunity to speak to you and set the scene for this meeting. It's also pretty intimidating. I will start by emphasizing I am not fundamentally an educationalist, but I am fascinated by all of the opportunities and challenges that face us in the education field. And I am, of course, leading some really exciting developments at UNSW. My background is almost entirely from the UK. I spent a year at Duke University at one point. I trained in Cambridge and in London. I'm a surgical gynae-oncologist by professional clinical specialty. I've done a lot of research in women's health, and it's the research really that led me into leadership roles as Dean of Medicine at UCL in London, Vice President and Dean of Medicine at the University of Manchester. And as Gareth says, I was here in about 1986 with my wife-to-be, not living here, just visiting on holiday. And we always knew that we, at some point, wanted to come and live and work in this great country, in this great city. And here I am now, 30 years or so, and 3 kids later. The kids are now grown up, so we had the chance to do something really exciting and challenging. And I have been President and Vice-Chancellor of UNSW Australia since February. So I'm still getting used to the place. I'm having a fascinating time. Before I go any further, I said that I agreed to do this talk with a degree of trepidation. And because of that, I did seek some advice from quite a few people who are listed here, several at UNSW, Stephen Marshall, our Director of Teaching and Learning, Philip Jones, Deputy Dean Education, UNSW Medicine, Chris Tisdall, Associate Dean, the Faculty of Science, Nick Wales, Associate Dean, Digital and Innovation, UNSW Business, Colin Lumsden, one of my old colleagues from the University of Manchester, and Dror Ben-Naim from Smart Sparrow. Anything I say that's wrong or stupid or silly, it's all their fault. Anything good is entirely my own invention. I'm not really. I'm really grateful to them, and they have no responsibility whatsoever for what I'm going to say. It's fantastic to be at UNSW, and it's great to be in Sydney, and it's wonderful to be in Australia. And I'm truly impressed by the quality of education that I'm seeing across the university sector, and specifically in medicine and health. At UNSW, over the last few months, we've been through a truly massive consultation process. Thousands and thousands of staff, students, and alumni involved in giving us ideas about the strategy, our 2015 to 2025 strategy. So we're developing a 10-year strategy. We've put all of that into a green paper, which some of you may have seen, which seems to have been pretty well received. We've consulted again on the green paper, and we're now gathering all of that into our white paper, which will come out in about 3 or 4 weeks' time, which will be our statement of intent for our strategy, and we'll have a final strategy by October. Now, it won't be any surprise to any of you that our educational strategy, which is being led by Ian Martin, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, who I'm delighted he's in the audience today, will be right at the core of that strategy. There are 8 pillars in our strategy under the headings of academic excellence, social engagement, and global impact. It's really important for us that social engagement and global impact are as important as academic excellence. In the academic excellence compartment, both research and education are equally important. We'll be looking to implement some of the things you'll be talking about today and many other things in our new educational strategy. In our research strategy, we'll be looking to emerge as a leading university ranked in the top 50 in the world. Under our social engagement strategy, there are many components that are relevant to what you'll be talking about today, not least our commitment to equality and diversity. I do think that's a really serious issue for us in Australia, in relation not only to the staff in our universities, but to admission to universities. We're looking to be a thought leader for the grand challenges that face society in Australia and around the world, and some of them very much relate to education and the challenges that education helps us deal with. We're looking to be stronger in knowledge transfer to work to get the great ideas in our universities out into society and to yield economic progress. We're also, under our global impact agenda, looking to internationalise even more our education. Australia is, as I'll comment later, a world leader in that area. We want to go even further than that, and using the sorts of technologies you're talking about will be absolutely at the heart of making that sort of progress. We're looking to partner within Australia and around the world, and the BEST network is a wonderful example of partnership which started in Australia but is now having an international impact, and that's very exciting. I'll just divert one more thing here to say that it's a real pleasure for me as President and Vice-Chancellor of the University of New South Wales to be speaking at the University of Sydney. How many staff are here from the University of Sydney? Fantastic. Well, don't tell Michael Spence that I got a chance to speak to you. It's great to be here at your university. The history of relations between the University of New South Wales and the University of Sydney has not always been fantastic. The University of Sydney objected to the foundation of UNSW, and that has really coloured relations. We had a historic meeting just 4 or 5 weeks ago of the senior teams of the University of Sydney and UNSW. And it turns out that that was the first meeting of the senior teams of the two universities in their history. And UNSW is 66 years old, and University of Sydney is even older. And it was a wonderful meeting, a really collegiate meeting with lots of areas identified where we can work together and collaborate and provide added value for students, for staff, for the community, for Australia. And you're going to hear a lot more about that. Some of them were in the arts and social sciences, some of them in engineering, but medicine was very definitely there. And both universities would like to see Australia emerge as a major, major power in medicine and health, and Sydney to emerge, and we will be working very closely together on that. And that was a diversion, but the final bit of our strategy, which it's important that I mention, is our commitment to the developing world. So at UNSW, we feel that a university with the resources, the expertise we have in such a wealthy city and country has a responsibility to work with those who are less privileged than ourselves, and education, again, is a key component of the work we plan there. So that's the exciting, ambitious, and bold strategy that we're planning at UNSW, but now I want to turn a little bit more specifically to the topic today, challenges in higher education, and I want to start just by reflecting on my own education. So I was incredibly privileged to do undergraduate medicine at Cambridge and my clinical training at the Middlesex Hospital in London. Sounds wonderful. I had a fantastic time. I was inspired partly because I wanted to do something that could change people's lives, improve people's lives, but I was also inspired by what I'm showing on this slide, and I'm not sure which was most, by watching Doctor in the House as a kid. Do any of you know what Doctor in the House was? It was a slightly sort of, it was a comedy. It glamorized medicine. You know, all the male doctors had a wonderful time with the nurses, that sort of stuff. And it was funny, and some of the characters were charismatic. But right at the heart of it, there was someone called Sir Lancelot Spratt, who was the head of the hospital or the medical school. And the way it portrayed medical teaching was absolutely appalling. And you know, this was 1950s, 1960s UK. Well, the truth is that I did my training in the 1980s in the UK, and it had hardly changed. And when I think back, some parts of it really were like Doctor in the House. The doctors ruling the roost, the students treated appallingly and treating everyone else appallingly. But my training resembled that a little bit, but it also was incredibly boring. You know, I remember learning anatomy, you know, spending a year doing a dissection in anatomy and really not learning very much from it. There was no one there really teaching me. It was learn as you go, and the clinical training was very much learn as you go. You're privileged to be here in a hospital. Take the opportunity or don't take the opportunity, it's up to you. It was so boring, the anatomy, that I had to find something that interested me, and I ended up finding a really interesting book, You couldn't go on the internet then, finding a really interesting book and reading just about every detail about the hippocampus. I went into my anatomy exams in my first year in Cambridge knowing everything that there is to know in the world about the hippocampus, or was then, but nothing that I was meant to know for the exam. And I failed my first year anatomy exam. And I think that some aspects of it was fun, and I learned enough to become a specialist surgeon. I did learn some anatomy in the end. But it was a struggle. And it's fantastic to see the way in which novel technology, the best network, the way people are working in partnership, the explosion of information is changing all that so dramatically. I've only just started to find out about the best network. I'm enormously impressed. You saw the film, so I won't read out the vision and mission, but it's clear to me that this sort of partnership, and the best network specifically, with the underlying platform, Smart Sparrow, is incredibly powerful. And I'm actually going to steal the words of Nicholas Hawkins, who's going to follow me. Nicholas, I think that you've just had this published a week or so ago. You're not sure if it's out yet? Well, here it is now. I think Nicholas's article, which will appear in the Australian, either has or will shortly appear in the Australian, sums it up very well. The best network is a world first. It's a teaching network run by academics, by you, for other academics. It provides academics in any participating institution with the legal, ethical, and financial framework needed to share or access courseware and learning design tools of the highest quality. It's adaptive. The adaptive nature of the tools means academics can easily alter content to ensure it's relevant to the context and the needs of their students and their institution. The cloud-based nature of the platform provides the accessibility and scalability needed to respond quickly to current and future demand. This is really true. In this way, the network supports a sustainable model of academic crowdsourcing that frees teachers from the constraints of their institutional silos to the benefit of student, teacher, and institution alike. It's an amazing resource, and when I think back to my education, it would, if this sort of resource had been available, have been a completely different experience. And of course, there's a lot more to it than that. The way people approach medical education now is transformed. Some things about the best network that I found these from the website. 1,500 biomedical educators from 206 schools. 140 rich, interactive, and adaptive lessons which have been shared. 18,000 images with annotations. It's an extraordinary resource. So, you're here today to have some really important discussions and to work together in partnership. I just wanted to set the scene by giving you some reflections on 12 challenges for the future of higher education. You could probably think of another 12, but I'm just going to quickly run through these 12, and I'll start with novel technology. These are challenges and opportunities. It's an unbelievably exciting time in medical education and higher education broadly. I'm delighted that UNSW has been right at the heart of this. So I've inherited a university which is really at the forefront. Smart Sparrow came from UNSW. Open Learning is a spin-out of UNSW's School of Computer Science. Adaptive Mechanics is from engineering at UNSW. 7 engineering schools collaboratively developing tutorials. They have evidence that they've reduced the failure rate at UNSW from 31% to 5%. And of course, the best network was developed, led by Nicholas Hawkins from UNSW when he was at our university. There are lots and lots of examples I could have given you from the work at UNSW. The UNSW Virtual Lab, rich, interactive, and adaptive seem to be the buzzwords that everyone's searching for. It enables learning by doing. It provides adaptive feedback. It adapts the lesson pathway. It's being reused across faculties. Adaptive Mechanics, funded in 2010, a suite of tutorials targeting concepts in mechanics, collaboratively developed by top Australian universities and, as I say, reduce the failure rate at UNSW, and the students love it, and many have been surveyed. These are just some of the comments about using adaptive tutorials. I'm not going to dwell on them. And there is a vast suite that you have available to you through the BEST network. Again, you'll hear a lot more about this, so I won't dwell on any of them in particular, but I have enjoyed over the last week when I was thinking about giving this talk, looking at them. And again, I just reflect, my medical education would have been so much better if I'd have had access to these resources. I will tell you about one other approach, and that is led by Nick Wales, our Associate Dean in the Business School, Associate Dean for Digital and Innovation in the Business School, about developing experiential learning with digital right at the heart of flipping the classroom. In 2014, UNSW opened a facility called The Place, Peer Learning and Creative Exchange, to introduce active learning across accounting, business law, statistics, and information systems. So this isn't medicine, but it's another example. The metrics suggest it's been very successful. The business school has gone from great big lecture theatres a bit like this, or even bigger, from students falling asleep. Is anyone asleep yet? I haven't bored anyone that much yet. To this sort of interactive work in a flipped classroom where students are working together, they're being supervised, and this is being used very extensively. It's been developed in phase 2 into gamification, where microeconomics is a game, playconomics. The feedback is very positive, a 24% increase in medium midterm grades and 50% decrease in failure rates. So it does seem that this sort of approach makes a real difference. So that's the first thing, novel technology, and I know that's what you're going to focus on today, but I'm going to just mention 11 other challenges and opportunities for the future of higher education. They're really exciting. The next one is the massive global demand. So the total number of students in higher education around the world is growing exponentially. Well, not exponentially, actually, that's not true. It's growing very fast. From 28 million in 1970, 165 million in 2009, 262 million forecast in 2025 when we will have implemented our UNSW 10-year strategy. That's extraordinary growth. The demand is enormous. At the same time, education is being globalized. The number of international students is also growing at a rate that is just hard to handle and provides enormous opportunities for us. 1975, there were 0.8 million international students. 2011, 4.3 million. It's going to double by 2025. That opens up extraordinary opportunities for the sort of technology that you're using. Australia is, of course, at the forefront of this, and as a percentage of the tertiary higher education population, Australia has more international students than anywhere else. 19.8% are international students. Number 4, there is increasing provider competition. And there's more provider competition in Australia. If you went back 30 years, there would be less than half the number of universities there are now, and there are many other providers of education that are not formally universities. And there is increasing competition around the world for the international students. This shows the number of international students by geographic region. Australia does pretty well, 264,000. The United States is still the biggest for students going to that country. But look at China, 328,000 and growing very fast. So that the pattern of this is going to change. There is more and more competition, and we're in a period of enormous globalization, new providers both within Australia and outside. Add to that higher student expectations. You know that better than I do. It's a tough world out there keeping the students satisfied. The students are going to expect even more if they're paying more. In this survey, 65% of students would have higher expectations if they were being asked to pay more for their education. And where I've come from in the UK, that really is the case. The students are demanding much more. And of course, The students have never known a world without the technology that we're talking about. This is new to us. We didn't have it when we were students, but the students have grown up with it. They expect it, and they expect a lot more. They expect a much more personalized, individualized experience. They know, because they have access to the internet, they know what they are entitled to expect. So they're asking much more questions, many more questions. Add to that, the employers want more. The world out there is changing. The expectations of what we will produce for employers in our students, it's much more demanding. They want a broader set of skills. They want people who can coordinate across boundaries. They want people who can deal with complex challenges. And they want higher levels of learning and knowledge than they did in the past. The working environment is changing. I'm not going to go through this slide, 10 skills for the future workforce, but it is very, very different to just 10 years ago. And we don't know where it's going in the future. The future work skills for 2020 or 2025 or 2030, it's really hard to predict. Again, I won't dwell on this, but we all know that the workplace is changing very rapidly. So there's another big challenge there that it has to influence the way we teach our students in 2015. And I enjoyed, I came across this cartoon. And the way I interpret this is that we just don't know what our students will be doing in 10 or 20 years' time, whatever their background and wherever they've come from. Add to that, there are serious constraints on funding. If you look at the proportion of university funding from public expenditure around the world, Australia is quite low down in this list of countries, 45% public funding, and it's going, as we all know, it will decrease. Interestingly, though, two of the countries which are regarded as having amongst the best higher education systems in the world, the US and the UK, have an even smaller proportion of public funding. But nevertheless, even if it doesn't change the quality, it is going to be a major constraint for us. And we all know what's proposed. This was Minister Pine before or when he made his announcement about the plans. When I signed up for UNSW in May last year, I was told this would all be sorted by Christmas 2014. So I've been conned, of course, arriving here to find that this is still ongoing. And who knows where this is going to end up. The plans, whether good or bad, everyone will have a different opinion, have met fierce resistance from students, from other politicians, and it doesn't seem they're going to get through anytime soon. We will probably have to wait for another election, and Minister Pine looks slightly different in some of his discussions. Now, my personal view on this is that higher education is both a personal and a public benefit. There needs to be a balance, and I think it's 50-50. I could go to 60-40 student and public contributions. I think the way to solve this is probably to allow fees to rise, to think about competition, to differentiate the sector, and to have a cap that reassures people about lower socioeconomic groups getting access to education and avoid students having excessive debt. But every person I speak to has a different opinion. I don't know where we'll end up with that. At the same time, we have to deal with challenges of inequality in access. This data looks pretty reassuring for Australia. If you have a high ATAR score, above about 75, you have about the same chance of getting into university whether you are from a low, medium, or high socioeconomic group. Sounds great, no problem. The problem is that if you're from a low socioeconomic group, you're much less likely to get a high ATAR. So when you look at, this is showing, forget about the bars within each socioeconomic group, but this shows the data for low to middle, mid to high, and high socioeconomic group in Australia, percentage commencing students at university. And you can see each of these should be at 25%, that's the average. You can see that if you're low or low to mid socioeconomic group, you have a much lower chance of getting a high ATAR score and going to university. I think that's a real challenge for us over the next few years. We have to think very carefully about admissions criteria and try and change that. Of course, a lot of it's not in our hands, a lot of it's in the schools and out there in society, but we have to do what we can to change that. A few more things. We have dreadful teaching metrics, or at least the teaching metrics that I've seen are pretty dreadful. We need to get much better at measuring the performance of individual teachers and teams of teachers. If we can't do that, it will be hard for us to put in place incentives that drive improved teaching across the sector. And if anyone has the answer to that, I'd love to hear from them. I'd give a lot of time. And it does seem extraordinary to me that with the wealth of expertise that we have across our universities in Australia and around the world, that no one has yet been able to grab this and really deal with it. We should be able to develop really good metrics for teaching performance. And maybe one of you has, so do let me know if that's the case. Over and above that, we need to change the way in which we value, reward, and recognise teachers. I've spent a lot of time since I've been in Australia going around meeting people, having discussions, and I'm often asked them, who was the person that really influenced your career? Who influenced your life? Who was it who inspired you and made you make the decisions that have led to where you are now? It is almost always a great teacher. Who are the people that we really value and reward in our higher education sector at the moment? By and large, it's the researchers. Both are really important. We need to change the way that we value, reward, promote teachers in our sector. And I came across this interesting data from a UK survey. 104 higher education institutions. In your department or faculty, to what extent are the following important for promotion? Is the green bar. And how important do you think they should be is the red bar. This is for research. So for research, and this is by Russell Group, 1994 Group, and other universities. For research, they all think it's important. They all think it is important and should be important. Wait for the answers on teaching. These are the answers on teaching. In your department or faculty, to what extent is teaching important for promotion? Not very. How important should it be? Very, very important. That's just one example of the sort of change we need to make in our universities. If we want to inspire people to have a career in teaching, which is the thing that I think most people agree is what inspires and directs and helps people make decisions about their career, we need to reward and value them. And promotion is just one way. There are other things as well. Two final things, which I think make this whole area even more exciting and even more challenging. My 11th point is that we're in a world where there is open access to knowledge. The nature of knowledge has fundamentally changed. In the slide deck that Nick Wales gave me to use, if I wanted to for this talk, he had these questions. And the reason he had the questions was to point out that if you were sitting in 1990 and you wanted to answer these questions, you'd have to go to a library, you'd have to phone people, you'd have to look it up, and you still might not find the answers to the questions. It took about 3 seconds to go on the internet and find the answers to all these questions. That's the name of Genghis Khan. This is this element that you probably hadn't heard of. This is how you calculate net present value. This is time of the sunset in Copenhagen. And in here is net present value explained in 5 minutes. So we are in a completely different era in terms of access to knowledge. That changes the very nature of knowledge. In addition, we have an extraordinary explosion of knowledge itself. The doubling time of medical knowledge. This is from a publication that I found. I thought it was very interesting. And these are estimates. But in 1950, the estimated doubling time of medical knowledge was 50 years. Sorry, in 1950, it was 50 years. In 1980, it was estimated to be 7 years. In 2010, 3.5 years. In 2020, it will be just 0.2 years, 73 days. Now, I tested this in my area of gynecological cancer, and amazingly, it's true. The number of papers in my specialty area has gone up exponentially in that way. That means that students starting medical school in 2010 will have 3 doublings of the amount of information that's out there about medicine and health during their training. The maximum learning at medical school that they could possibly do will be just 6% of the information that's out there by 2020. This means that knowledge is expanding way faster than our ability to assimilate it or apply it effectively. We can't deal with that just by adding more material or time to the curriculum. It's just not going to work. We need a fundamental change in the way we look at the curriculum and the way we organise things. So over and above everything you're talking about today, I'm sure that you are thinking really carefully about how we organise the medical curriculum of the future. How do we deal with this? How do we organise things that we can produce medical students who are adaptable and flexible enough to respond to all of the changes that are going to happen in their workplace and to the massive information that's going to be coming upon them throughout their medical career. Now, most of these challenges are very hard for us to influence. I've mentioned 12. I think that there are about 5 where we have a fighting chance. Novel technology is one of them, and you're talking about that today. I think that we can, in our universities, do something about inequality in access. We can change the criteria. I'm very concerned about the ATAR score being the be-all and end-all of admission to universities in Australia, and I think there's a lot we can do there. We can, I think, if we really rise to the challenge, do something about poor teaching metrics. We can easily raise the status of teaching and reward and incentivize our teachers properly and promote them. And we can, through thinking carefully about the curriculum, do something about helping our students to deal with the knowledge explosion. And a lot of that work is going on in our medical school at UNSW, and I know in all of your medical schools, and the more we collaborate on developments in the curriculum to handle all of these challenges, the better. And I'm sure that's another thing that the best community network will help facilitate. I just wanted to finish by giving you a flavour of the sorts of things that are emerging in our UNSW educational strategy. And Ian Martin is sitting there. He's leading on this. We're having very exciting discussions. I'm not going to give everything away. It'll be public in October. But we, over the next 10 years, want to ensure that throughout the university we have a designed approach to our educational offering. We will incorporate digital root and branch so that our entire course is designed to be blended and flexible. We will definitely be putting in place steps to value and reward our teaching staff in a way that just hasn't happened before in the UK or Australia or in many other parts of the world. We'll be working, that will involve changes in workload structure, more research-focused staff, more teaching-focused staff, but all of those staff working together in the concept of team-based teaching. We will have a wide range of degree offerings. We're in a world now where there's all sorts of different things that students want. So we're not narrowing it down, we're broadening it out, we'll make it clear to students what they can have, and we will make it very flexible. We'll have an emphasis on flexibility of courses and on the timing of their education. I don't think we're going to have a one-size-fits-all educational pattern in 5 to 10 years' time. Students want and need flexibility. They're coming from all parts of the world to UNSW for their education, and from all sorts of different backgrounds and with all sorts of different plans from the local population. And we are going to have a relook at our semester structure, and I won't tell you where that's got to, but I think that's quite important in introducing the sort of flexibility we want. So, this is a really exciting time for higher education. Smart Sparrow, open learning, adaptive mechanics, the best network are right at the heart of this, but I would say that there's a lot more that we need to do, even if we introduce technology, digital, in a collaborative and partnership way, as you are doing, there are still many, many other challenges that this network needs to rise to. I'm really grateful to you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And I hope that this fantastic partnership goes from strength to strength and you have really exciting discussions today. Thank you very much for listening.